Welcome to Inspire Saratoga, a show that highlights the people and stories that make our home a place of strength, inspiration, and success. I'm Michael Kurkowski, physical and mental performance coach and resident of Saratoga Springs. And in this show, my mission is to connect with the great people who also call this place home, hear about their work and what they do for this town, and share their insights and experiences in health, wealth, and happiness for you, my neighbors. Thank you for joining me wherever you are in town. Let's dive in. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Inspire Saratoga. Thank you for joining me. I am Michael Kurkowski. This is a legacy lesson episode. We're going to dive right into my episode I did with Meghan Connolly Haupt, which was season 2, episode 2, and wanted to dive into a very personal story that I got from this, as well as a lesson that I got in as well. So to begin with, if you are new to the Legacy Lessons episodes here, this is where I like to break down the different insights and stories that I've heard from episodes in the podcast and how it affected me, the different lessons that I got from them, and how I can bring them out into my life, which bringing them into the podcast and on these episodes is hopefully help you resonate with them as well and maybe take these lessons into the work that you're doing in your own lives. So this is actually something I learned this week that I thought was powerful and kind of why I do these lessons as well. You may have heard of the learning pyramid before. If you haven't, it's essentially we remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, but up to 90% of what we teach and what we do. So from that, reading I think is great, but if you're listening to podcasts or listening to audiobooks, you've already doubled the opportunity to remember the things that you're trying to learn. But then if you teach them or you find a way to articulate that to others, that is the best way to recall them and to keep them in your arsenal to work with in your life. So for a selfish reason, I love doing these because it gives me the opportunity to remember these incredible conversations that I've had with people and the lessons that I learned from them. But with that, let's dive right in. So this episode I did with Meghan was interesting in a way that for a lot of the times I've been doing podcasting, I've connected with a lot of different coaches and thought leaders who were in a similar field in many ways as what I've done, a lot of physical and mental performance-based work. It's very rare that I've spoken to people who are doing something completely different than anything that I've done or something that I know very, very little about. And that was really cool about connecting with Meghan. So she has opened a company and runs a business called Inclusive Saratoga, which is a specific company that helps businesses and nonprofit organizations build their business up to be more inclusive and available to the disabilities community. So I know nothing about the disability community or really anything with nonprofit or what she was really aiming for. So I was really curious about the work that she was doing. I thought it was really powerful, the traction that she was making with her business and where this idea of hers came from. And I think what's so cool is when you speak to somebody who is doing something so different than what you normally do throughout your day or what you work on, you can get some very interesting lessons that you may have not gotten before from just connecting with people who are in your sphere of what you do, or kind of just the regular people that you connect with. So when I asked Meghan about how this came about and her experience, there was a lot of interesting parallels that I've had in my own life. So this really came from her own personal experience of having a daughter who was disabled, who was nonverbal, non-mobile, and her life of kind of dealing with that with her family throughout raising her and growing up and the challenges that came from that. And one of the things she said is how isolating you can feel as a family with a member of the family who has disabilities because other people just don't get it, or they just try and give you insights or advice and things that you just know you don't need or you don't want, but some people just don't know how to respond to seeing something that's very different than where they're at. So one of the main reasons why she built this business and what she wanted to do was to help other people really understand what people with disabilities are going through. And with a lot of different things that they have is they're very restricted in the things that they can do And if they can open up those doors, not only does it, help being more inclusive to this demographic of people, but for businesses and nonprofits, that's actually helps their bottom line because they get more customers from there. So she gave a really detailed insight into how this business works. But when she was talking about her experience of going through that and the challenges personally for her, as well as the challenges that dealt with her family, specifically her other daughter, who was going to school with her daughter and had to be very responsible in that time and was kind of thrown into this of, having to deal with this as well. It brought up a lot of memories to me in my life. So when I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with ALL leukemia and went through treatment and chemotherapy and went into remission, thank God. And I'm healthy and fine now as I'm speaking to today. But I remember chatting with my family about what this experience was like because for me at 3 years old, you don't really remember much at that time. Like I remember like flashes and images at that time, but the emotional piece of it, I was just too young. I wasn't developed at that time. But in talking to my family, specifically my parents, about this, is I asked them a little bit about Megan's story and if any of that resonated with them. And when I was speaking to them, they said there was a lot of things that were very similar to that, where they lost a lot of friends in that process because they couldn't understand and couldn't deal with it. They were giving just unsolicited advice, specifically to my mom, of like, you should be going out, you should be taking care of yourself. When my mom was like, I am dealing with a very sick child here who could be lost from this. This could be a fatal diagnosis that's going on. And dealing through the process of that, what I found, which was so interesting, was the strength that my family developed in that time is something I've written about before, and I think is such an interesting story for me personally. Because with families that go through children with cancer, more often than not, that leads into a lot of marital issues. A lot of divorces come from that. A lot of separation of families happen from that challenging time. And for me, I was very fortunate that my family actually got closer and stronger together in that time. My mom was very focused on specifically everything that she needed to do as a mom to be there for me. My dad really understood his role of, being a caregiver for the family and going to work and, being there in those times, but he had his role. And my sister, who was very similar to Megan's daughter, was an unbelievable young kid. She was a few years older than me, but she was unbelievable at helping me throughout that time. And for me, it's interesting because I've seen so much of this just in retrospect because I really didn't live it at 3 years old and understanding what was going on from there. But I think it's so powerful that this was one of the first recognitions of strength that I realized in my life. It wasn't the PRs that I saw or amazing athletic feats or physical prowess that I saw from athletes or people that I worked with or people I admired in my later life. The first real lesson of strength came from my parents and my sister and my family during times of ridiculous challenge and an unknowing challenge when you really don't know what's going to happen and so much stuff is beyond your control of what you can do. You've just got to figure it out one day at a time. And it's in those times throughout our lives when we are really going through the shit, when all you can do is just focused on what you can control to the best of your ability. That's where you really start to see what's real in your life. I think you start to recognize how strong that you possibly can be. And also, who are the people that are really in your corner and the ones that step up in those times? And also the ones that maybe you thought were really close with that you turned out are not really the people that you need in your corner in those times. So the legacy lesson that I came from this that I thought was really interesting was the greatest strengths that we have in our life comes from often the most challenging times that we're faced with. But when we're in the midst of that challenge, it is so hard to look at the bright side or see the silver lining from it. Like we don't see that often when we're in the shit, when we're in those moments. But in retrospect, when you really look back at it, is those times of the most resistance and the most challenges in our life, the greatest strength that we have within us starts to arise and come out. And I saw from Megan what she did is she took all this challenge and the experience that she was living on a day-by-day basis in her life, and she realized that she had another strength where she could bring this out with her experience in marketing and business and build an entire business around helping other people who are going through these same things get a little bit better and have this a little bit more inclusivity from the business side as well as the consumer side. So she took it from her own personal experience and brought it out into a service venture. My family, it's the same thing, who now we developed such a strong and powerful bond just from that time that we all had to go through uh in that process. And for me, it's still kind of weird to look back at that time because again, I was so young. I didn't recognize the severity of it. When you're 3, 4 years old, you just think this is life. We're going to the hospital and I'm getting injections or I'm getting a spinal tap or a bone marrow test or whatever it is. That was just life, not realizing the emotional strain and the challenge and the resistance that was coming on my family at that time. But from that, I look back on it and I can see how much strength came from that time. So the question that I wanted to leave with us on this legacy lesson is, maybe you're going through a real challenge in this time. Maybe it's a really struggling time that you're going into. But if there's a reframe question that you can come from this, is what strength am I going to be able to bring out of this time? What strength can I bring from these challenging times that is going to serve me so much more in the future, because that time's going to come. And I think it's just enough of a question to get you through these challenging times and to bring the best out of yourself in those moments. And maybe you also know another person who maybe is going through a, some nasty stuff right now. It might be a family member with cancer, maybe it's a child, or maybe they have a family member with disabilities or so, and you don't know what to do. The best thing that we can do in those times is just to hold space. Maybe it's not a time where you need to be giving off, unsolicited advice or trying to solve a problem. Just being there and just being a person that they can rely on if they need or not. That's one of the best things that we can do, not just as an individual, but as a community in general. So I guess there's a couple legacy lessons that I got coming from this conversation here, but I wanted to leave you on that one. Okay. So if this resonated with you, if this hit a nerve on you, please let me know. Drop it in our comments here or send me a message. I would love to hear from you on that. But thank you for listening to this legacy lesson. I really appreciate you, and we'll chat with you on the next one. All right. Peace. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you got some great value from this episode and a little more insight into some inspiring work happening right in this town. If you want to know more about our guests' work and check out more of what they are doing, please click on the links in the show notes below. And along with that, check out the direct link to 5-Minute Mindset. This is a 5-minute video that gives you the 2 best practices that you can do every day in 5 minutes that will create a major impact in your mental strength and resilience. If you are on your own mission to become physically and mentally stronger, these practices will be a serious game changer for you. Seriously. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll see you on the next one.